His troops had been encamped on the border for weeks, hundreds of thousands of them. He kept saying they were only there for exercises. No one believed him. On the 24th of February, in the middle of the night, Vladimir Putin ordered his troops across the border and into Ukraine, a country that had never threatened Russia. The attack was totally unprovoked. The Russian army attacked from 3 different sides, from occupied Crimea in the south, from the east, and from Belarus in the north. I remember hearing on the news that Kyiv was going to fall in a matter of days, and that Ukraine itself would fall in a week or so. From the north, a large Russian force was going straight towards Kyiv. They quickly took control of the Chernobyl nuclear power plant. In Kyiv, a sort of controlled panic had begun to set in, as Russian missiles struck seemingly random buildings and infrastructure. Gunfights could also be heard across the city, as the Ukrainian army was battling Russian saboteurs. These saboteurs had often dressed up in Ukrainian uniforms and would randomly shoot at civilians, as to try and create an unmanageable situation. They also had orders to take control of government buildings and important infrastructure. During the first night of war, the Ukrainian army killed 60 of them. Putin had also sent Russian hitmen to the city. Their order was to kill the Ukrainian president, Volodymyr Zelensky, using any means necessary. They failed. In the morning of the 26th, Russian artillery had reached positions close enough to the city to begin bombarding it. For more than 30 minutes, Russian shells rained down on the capital of a major European nation. In the first 2 days of the war, many thousands Kyiv residents volunteered to help defend their capital. More than 25,000 rifles were handed out, together with more than 10,000 bullets. Seemingly overnight, most men in and around Kyiv had become a decentralized army to be reckoned with. They built and manned checkpoints on the roads and looked for Russian saboteurs. In the suburbs, they would dig trenches to be ready to face the Russian vanguard head-on. Those who couldn't take up arms started producing masses of Molotov cocktails. In a matter of days, the people of Kyiv had turned their city into the largest fortress in the world. Remember, at this time, most people were thinking that Russian troops were just about to enter the city itself. On the 27th, the clashes between the Ukrainian army and Russian saboteur groups continued, as did the Russian shelling of the city. A Russian strategic bomber deliberately targeted high-rise residential apartment blocks with missiles. It was also on this day that soldiers from the 64th Motorized Rifle Brigade, together with 2 units of Ramzan Kadyrov's Chechen fighters, reached the small town of Bucha on the outskirts of Kyiv. This is the place where some of the worst crimes against humanity since the Second World War would take place. But no one would know about that until a month later. I plan on making a video recounting what happened there in the near future. On the 28th, fresh Russian troops reached the suburbs of Kyiv. This was also the day when the first satellite images of the now infamous 64-kilometer long Russian convoy heading towards the city appeared. Throughout March 1st, heavy fighting would take place between the Ukrainians and the Russian invaders in the Kyiv suburbs. But one thing was sure: at this point, the Russian lightning advance had stalled. It was also on March 1st that Russian missiles struck the memorial for the Babi Yar massacre committed by the Nazis during World War II. In the early morning of March 2nd, the Ukrainian Air Force shot down 2 Russian fighters over the city. The mayor of Kyiv, Vitaly Klitschko, stated that the Russians were beginning to surround the city in an attempt to encircle it. But to do that, they would need the supplies from the long convoy headed to the city. That convoy was completely stuck though. Along all the highways leading into the city, the Ukrainians had built trenches They also repeatedly had successes in ambushing the convoy. In these ambushes, they would seek out Russian fuel tanks and destroy them. And it wouldn't be long before the convoy was completely out of fuel. The Ukrainians also continuously bombed the convoy, making efficient use of the now famous Turkish-made Bayraktar drones. Over the next 2 weeks, brutal fighting would take place in the area around Kyiv, as the Russian effort to encircle the city continued. Russian forces would also speed towards Kyiv from the east in a move to help with surrounding the city. They would ultimately be stopped as well. 2 weeks into the war, it became clear that Kyiv would not fall to the invaders. During this time, Russian bombs and missiles would fall on the city every day. Thousands of civilians would take refuge in the deep metro stations. Here, they would do their best to comfort each other, while in the distance listening to the many explosions above them. Then on the 22nd of March, the Ukrainian army launched a huge counter-offensive around the city. They attacked the undersupplied Russians with everything they had, making Vladimir Putin's troops suffer heavy casualties. The Russians were quickly sent running. After suffering heavy losses of both soldiers and material, the Russians announced that they would withdraw from the Kyiv area on March 29th. The suburb of Irpin, right here, is the closest that Vladimir Putin's troops got to Kyiv. If the Russians had managed to capture the city, it would have been an absolute bloodbath. Intelligence reports states that Vladimir Putin's plan was to have his soldiers going door to door, arresting politicians, journalists, and human rights activists, executing them on the spot. The FSB had literally compiled a kill list consisting of so-called problematic individuals. On the top of this list was not only President Zelensky, but also his wife. After having conducted their murder spree, the Russian plan was then to install a puppet government, essentially making Ukraine a Russian vassal state. Even though a part of the Ukrainian victory can be attributed to Russian stupidity and ineffectiveness, the main reason why the Ukrainians won is because of the courageous men and women of the Ukrainian army and the territorial defense forces. Their high morale, smart thinking, and effective decision making made it possible. They slept in the same trenches where they stopped Vladimir Putin's tanks and helicopters. They ran through forests and fields to ambush the Russian convoys, and they sacrificed themselves for each other, their country, and for Europe. During the entirety of the battle, President Zelensky stayed in his capital. In fact, when the Americans offered him a way out of the city, he responded with the now famous quote, "The fight is here. I need ammunition, not a ride." Thank you so much for watching. If you want to help me out, please go and leave a like and comment on the video and subscribe to my channel.